Most impressive founders I know are not on magazine covers. They are in the trenches, building things the industry desperately needs. That is why I decided to launch Founders Corner, a new series on fashion forward celebrating the founders actually doing the work. No fluff, no vanity metrics, real founders, real problems, and real solutions. There's a lot of problems and lessons that goes behind the scenes in building a viable business that doesn't get celebrated enough. It's what I call the entrepreneurial spirit. Founders Corner is addressing just that. Telling the story of real impact founders in fashion and technology who are doing the real work. Today, I am joined by Natasa of Pitra the Label, a founder who wanted to be a Vogue writer, but later chose to work in the messy factory floor rather than the beautiful design rooms with mood boards and fancy sketches. She just couldn't ignore the fact that women aged 35 to 60 couldn't find the clothes that fit them or makes them feel seen, heard, and valued in their own skin. With Pitra the Label, she's making these women of different colors and different sizes feel seen, heard, and comfortable in their own skin. Let's welcome Natasa of Pitra the Label. Hello, Natasa. Thank you very
Hello.
much for agreeing to be part of Founders Corner. I really appreciate your presence. Yes.
Thank you.
And I would say you and many other people who will be joining are the very first set of people who are opening the floor for Founders Corner. I completely appreciate you. I really admire what you've been building. And thank you very much for being part of it once again. Basically, we
Okay.
want to know about you, about your brand, and what you've been building. I believe that there's a story behind anything that any founder is doing. It's like being an entrepreneur. I want you to
Yeah.
tell us who you are and what your brand does in your own words.
I'm Natasha and I own a women's wear brand called Pitra the Label based in Melbourne, Australia. And the brand has evolved many times due to my experience in the fashion industry, as I've always worked within the fashion industry across from retail to wholesale, then to design production. And I built the brand based on the notion of combining craftsmanship across the globe, because one belief that I have as a founder, particularly in having experience in the fashion industry, is that we are globally connected by craftsmanship with our hands, and every culture that you look at has a specific embroidery or print or
Yeah.
fabric that they use. And I was trying to find a connection in how that can come into my brand for the women that buy my clothing. And so basically, it has evolved into a very craftsmanship led brand for women founders, entrepreneurs, mothers, any woman that, wants to wear something that not only makes them feel good, but also makes them comfortable, but also makes them connected globally by different cultures. Because here in Australia, we are very multicultural, and I wanted to blend that in as a brand and as a value, because the women that buy my clothing come from all corners of the world, and that is really where the brand is at the moment. However, it did start out in a different light, and that is with my own design and pattern making skills. I began the brand whilst working on the factory floor in a women's wear factory, actually. And the people that taught me the main skills around fashion design were actually the women in the factory who had come from different countries. So and being a first generation Australian as well, I brought my own culture to it from my family, from my parents. And so that's in a nutshell what the brand has formed over the years. But it really began from the desire to create something meaningful with purpose. And that wasn't just a fast fashion item that you'll forget about tomorrow. It's about in capturing the story of the people that make the brand, not just me.
Exactly. Wow. I love that. It's so deep
Yeah.
rooted. I was just about to like raise it up when you also mentioned it. Fast fashion is doing a lot of harm, right? Making things look
Yeah.
so easily replaceable because there's no value, there's no intent or soul or process connected to it that makes it valuable. With what
Yeah.
you're doing now, it just takes it to a completely different level. Because I remember while
Yeah.
growing up, when we buy clothes, we buy it because there's a way it makes us feel. And it's not
Yeah.
just something that happens for a particular moment. It's something that when you're like, okay, probably the clothes doesn't size you anymore, you're also very happy to give it to someone else. And then it's like something you are passing on that was valuable to you. It's not just something you just want to, that's easily replaceable and it's of value. And that
Correct.
is why you are willing to pass it on. I also see
Yes.
people who are able to like purchase Pitra the Label's clothing and they're also willing to pass this on
Yeah.
to someone who can also see the story and just see the value attached to it and would want to be part of it. I think one way or the other, you've also been able to answer the next question I want to ask, which is the problem that your brand exists to solve and who you're solving it for. But I want you to also like just go into what you saw that made you say this problem has to be solved with Pitra the Label and who exactly you are solving it for.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question because, like I said, it has evolved. In the beginning, it came from the pure passion of working in the fashion industry with big brands that I guess were more business like than were from business rather than design. And that inspired me to create something with knowledge of fabrics and silhouette because I found that working in the industry, I learnt so much, but at the same time, the people that really were, the main players were not understanding fully the design and production side. And that's why a lot of my jobs in fashion were actually in production. And that actually helped me to see the problem that needs to be solved is good quality garments that are made right, you know? And that's how it started. But I guess that as I evolved as a person and a brand, I found that the people that were coming to me were of an older demographic, which has become my customer now. And the problem that I'm solving is actually looking at the woman age 35 to 60 because there is a massive gap in the market for that age group because
True.
there's this perceived notion that you get to a certain age as a woman and that's it, we're done, and I
Yeah,
don't
just
think we are.
settle.
I think as we get older, I think we are roaring even louder, and that's
True.
the problem, and that's the problem that I believe the brand is solving is comfortable, natural fiber garments for women of that age bracket, of all ages really, but mainly that age bracket that find it difficult to find something comfortable and that still makes them feel good and that they can still express who they are. So that's where Picture the Label is solving that problem here as a small brand. And it's funny because at the moment, as I take this interview, the brand is actually in a reset stage at the moment. So I'm rebranding, redoing a lot of things, have a new collection I'm working on. And it's a really good point that you're asking is because as you go through business, I don't believe that in any business, not just in fashion, that you just stand still. You have to keep moving, you have to
Exactly.
keep evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And with so much social media now, it's quite interesting to see the trend of fast fashion, but then the trend where a lot of the younger clientele are actually getting sick of it too. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's affordable for them. And I really believe that, by trying to solve this problem, we have to educate the customer as well. Because for us down here, people will question the price very quickly, even if the quality is good, because they're looking at that with, cost of living pressures. So they're thinking, oh, do I spend $300 on a designer shirt or do I go online to Shein and buy a cheaper one? So again, I think that the problem that I'm solving is for that demographic and making them feel seen.
Yeah, very true. It's just that very huge gap that you are
Yeah.
trying to fill right now. I know you said you had a background in production and being down at the factory floor also opened your eyes to see a lot of things. But what made you know that this is a problem and how did you know that you were the one that could fix it? What made you agree to say the person or that someone that would fix this problem is me?
That's a good question. To be honest, I think in most of my roles in the industry, I was coordinating or managing. And I found that when I was leading people in that space, that I could naturally lead people that I worked with. And it kind of gave me the spark to think that, well, if I can do it here for someone else, why couldn't I do it for myself? And I think that the drive within me to always create something more has been something of myself as a person from a young age. And I've always wanted to do more, no matter what I do, no matter where I work. So that I think that kind of sparked me is because I was in the factory floor and I worked with a lot of high-end designers and their designs were beautiful and amazing. But they only had a certain size range or they only had a certain sample size. And, when I worked for them, I was a lot younger. But as I get older too, I can see now that, that size isn't every woman. And, you see it more and more. And that's how I started to design my designs differently because when I first started out, I was doing custom made. I actually started in trying to do custom made dresses within bridal, and it got me to see a different side of the industry, but also to see that clientele that I'm targeting now. They are older, their bodies might have changed, but they have the disposable income. So they're not, 20-something-year-olds studying, trying to pay their rent, and in that stage of life. So I think that's those few points together made me realize that, someone with my background, with so much experience, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, so it's just like going in and saying, I can do this. I have the
Yeah,
background, I have the understanding. I've also felt this problem. I think it's also very important rather
yeah,
than just idealizing what a problem looks like. At that point in time, it will just be based on assumptions. But when it is a problem that one way or the other you've been able to feel, the solutions come almost intuitively. It's a natural thing for you to say, I want this problem solved, and this is how I am going to solve it. I
yeah,
think you just have to, one way or the other, interact or live in the problem. You've also
yeah.
mentioned something which I also want us to go into the early days. When you started, how was it like? Because I know those are usually the messy beginnings, but they'll actually shape you into something that you still appreciate. But what did the early days look like? Instagram has a lot of reels that look fantastic, but we know behind the scenes, a lot of things happen. What were you
Yeah.
figuring out? What were you getting wrong? What were you learning too on the fly? Like, just take us back to those days.
So I started out as a freelance writer. I wanted to work for Vogue, and
Oh,
I actually studied in the USA. I did a student exchange and I got back and I knew that I wanted to work in magazines. I wanted to do journalism. The way that how I pair it back to fashion is basically when I was a child, I don't often share this, but I actually did music. So I played keyboard, guitar, and I
ah,
sang. Don't ask me to sing. I'm not going to. I don't sing anymore. And at the age of 7, I used to design my own costumes because I had this vision that I was going to be a pop star on the stage and who was going to do my costume. So I designed them myself. So when I look back now, I think that's where the seed started. And then as I got older, I had this vision that I wanted to work for Vogue. And I know many girls have that vision, which I think is quite interesting because as we know, Devil Wears Prada 2 came out recently. And I really resonate with that movie because I went into the industry trying to be a writer, but ended up getting into fashion design, which I'll explain in a second. But the early days were tough. And when I say that at the time, you're so young and innocent and you don't know what the right path is. So you're trying all different things and it can be quite tough because you're in a different stage of life. I moved out of home very young. I studied fashion in Sydney. I was accepted in the London College of Fashion. However, at the time, didn't have the funds to get there. So I went to Sydney instead and I was interning. I was interning once a week. I was working 5 days a week and I was at college 1 day a week. So I only had 1 day a week off. I worked 6 days straight from working
okay.
at I don't know how you would call it because I know in the UK you have something different, but it's like a music store here, and I was just a checkout chick, but that was basically paying my rent. And then I'd go after work to nighttime classes studying fashion and business. And then I would be doing all these internships. So the early days were really tough. They were tiring. I didn't have much money to buy a nice meal. So I was literally living on tuna, rice, whatever I could get. And I think that those early days built my resilience and my adaptability and that drive to not give up because, when you leave the home and you don't have your parents and you're by yourself, I think it's a different drive. And I
Yes.
also teach, and I tell my students this because, like I said, I didn't get up one morning and say, "Oh, I have a headache. I can't go to work." I had no choice because I had to pay the rent. And the only way to get in the fashion industry is to have experience. And how could I get experience if I'm trying to pay the rent? So I managed to fit it in, and it was long days, long hours, but it ended up paying off because my first job that I got in fashion design was actually a customer of mine at the retail shop I worked at. She was from London and she'd moved to Australia working in men's tailoring, and she was so happy with my service. She said, "Whatever you need, just come, like I will help you with anything." And I said to her, "Oh, I'm actually studying fashion because you're a fashion designer." And she said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Well, if you can help me there one day, that would be great." She came back 3 months later and offered me her job because she was moving on to another job. So that's how I actually got into the industry. And it was all not just about hard work, but it was also about being myself, being kind
Mm-hmm.
and respectful, that that person remembered to come back to me and offer me a job. And that's
Yeah.
exactly how I got in to fashion design. And I worked there for almost a year, but I got homesick. So I ended up coming back to Melbourne. And my mindset was, I don't care what I get as long as it's in fashion. And that's how I ended up in production, because none of the girls that were graduating really wanted a production job. They all went for the fashion design job. And I was the only one that sat there and was like, "You know what? I don't care. I just want to learn. Wherever it's from, I want to learn." And that's how I got into production and worked for some very big high-end brands here because of that attitude.
Yes. So, was there a moment you almost stopped and like you just gave up? Because I usually share this story when I'm talking with people that I drifted from fashion for a while because
Yeah,
it was so painful. When I mean painful, the waste, right? I usually worked with brands. Like I also freelanced a lot. I hustled so hard, right? I was trying
yeah,
my best to do a lot of things, but I started working with brands and I started seeing the waste, how Instagram was always perfect, but behind the scenes were so messy and nobody usually talked about that. So I felt like it was a very far cry from reality. And it just made me drift away because I am more of like, I love doing things that feel impactful. I felt like I was being so wasteful in even in what I was doing. So I drifted off and I went into tech. I became a coder. I started coding. I started doing also I learned a lot of designs because I still couldn't abandon design. So I started
yeah,
doing graphic designs, doing web UI UX and those kind of things. But I still could
yep,
not, abandon my love for fashion. I found my way back, but the point is I stopped or I almost stopped and I just shared with you what happened and what kept me going too was just I loved it. I just could not abandon it. So for you, I want to know if there was a moment you ever stopped and what happened and what kept you going.
That's another good question. Yes, many times. I've even had a moment recently where I've been like, "Yeah, nah, don't want to do it anymore." Only those who work in fashion will truly understand that feeling. And I've had it many times. The biggest one, though, was when I had kids with my first child. She wouldn't sleep. I don't want to scare anyone listening, but and so I was going crazy because I was only sleeping like 3 hours a night. And at the time I worked for Fila Australia, the sportswear brand, the global brand, and it was an amazing job. And I guess I did very well for my manager, and he wanted me back quicker than what maybe some other women would go back. And that was the point where I almost said no. And I sat there for a minute and I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can get up and juggle this all. But actually, I'll say my looking at my daughter, she inspired me to go back because I thought, how can how can I not be that role model for her? So that's actually what made me go back, is that I didn't want to, and even not even with fashion, anything in life, I didn't want to give up once I had kids. That split second you have them, you think, oh, I can't do this. But they actually became my biggest drive. And I have had so much success since having kids, which is very contradictory to what
The
society
norm.
makes mothers to be. But that was that moment, and I went back and I achieved so much there, and I'll, like, forever be grateful for that. As hard as it is, and it still is challenging, I still have my moments, it's my biggest drive now.
Wow, actually, it's a big contradiction to what society is saying now.
Yeah, it is.
I really love that. I really love
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
That
Yeah,
what seems like can bring you down or can stop you from what you're doing is actually what is driving you and making you know
yeah,
that I can't give up. I really can't give up. This is what I want to be. And there's also someone who is going to grow up and look at me and say, okay, my mom inspired me. I think that's like one of the coolest things to ever hear. Your child say, my mom was the biggest reason why I continue doing what I am doing now. So it's
yeah.
having, I think at the end of it, it's impact,
Yes,
down to
yes.
impact. And it's not just
Yeah,
about you, but also
yeah,
the people who are like very affiliated with you, like your children. What's
yeah.
the most common assumption about this industry that Pitra the Label directly challenges?
That you have to look a certain way or be a certain nationality to wear certain clothes.
Mm.
That
Wow.
you can be anyone wearing the clothes. That's why another thing, like when I do photo shoots, I like to choose women from different color and different background to have that in the brand too. Like I said, we're multicultural, and I don't want the brand to just be perceived for one type of person. We're all women, and we all share similarities in that age group. I haven't yet, like, I have had some older models wear my stuff, but with this reset that I'm doing, I will have more.
Wow.
I just shot some stuff over the weekend, and that model was from the Philippines. Gorgeous. So again, I just want the
Wow.
brand to, yeah, I just want the brand to show that, you know, that connection of culture and craftsmanship. And that is my biggest value proposition right now, is because I work with so many people from different backgrounds, and we all share one thing in common, and we all have specific craftsmanship in each culture. Like, think about embroidery. If you go from, from Asia to Europe to Africa, the embroidery and the colors and the prints, they're similar but different. We're all
Yeah,
connected that way, you
exactly.
know? Every
Mm-hmm.
culture has something, a
Yes.
traditional costume, you know? So I'm really owning in on that because, the brand got at one stage bigger than what I thought it would, and it was difficult to manage as I don't have a big team, and I had a choice whether I go and scale and take the risk or whether I keep it as what it is. And the funny part about that is the whole time that I worked in the fashion industry, I was dreaming of this big brand. But then once I went through it all and worked for different brands and did production, did design, had late nights, I was like, do I really want just another big brand? Or do I want something that's still small but still impactful? And so I chose that because I got into teaching, and I have found that that's where my voice is now. Not in singing, in speaking and teaching. I can't sing, okay? But so that's where I think the brand is at, where, women from all backgrounds can feel comfortable in the clothes that I design.
Yes. We can also label it being inclusive. It's not
Yes.
within a box and saying, okay, this is how we think you should look. And this is what we're designing for you to make sure you look that way. But it's like really getting feedback from these people, understanding them, how they want to
Yeah.
feel, and then responding to what they want or their demands.
Yeah.
Well done. I think it's really like an amazing story and deep roots. And it shows that with this is completely scalable. What has been the single hardest challenge you faced as a founder? Not operationally, but probably personally, the weight of building something from literally nothing, right?
The amount of no's that I have gotten, the amount of people that have said no to me, I can't count anymore. And there's been many, and in the beginning,
Wow.
like when I decided to go into wholesale, I had to be the salesperson too. And I think that's a skill that you need to learn as a founder, is
Mm-hmm.
how to sell yourself, and that can be challenging. My personality is not a salesperson. I'm a very friendly, happy, out there person. So when I come across people that are not, it can be very challenging. And the amount of no's that I got from boutiques or from magazines or models or like really big influencers that I'd be like, please wear my brand, we can help each other out, or whatever I was trying to do, because in the beginning you don't have the funds to pay everyone. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of exchange. And that's what people don't understand either.
Mhm.
People that have worn my brand have chosen to wear it. And a lot of influencers that I've worked with have chosen to wear the brand. And I think that's a massive compliment in itself. And that's, as a founder, when you start working in the industry, if you can find people to collaborate with that want to wear the brand, they're your people. And I think, yeah, the biggest thing is the amount of no's. I actually have a whole list. I could probably compile a no list, but it's normal, hey?
Actually, I think it's the life of being an entrepreneur where you have to keep knocking on doors that could be
Yeah.
shut. And most times you do not know that they're shut until you start knocking. It's
Yep.
like, okay, you knock and they're like, no. Sometimes some are compassionate no's, some are like very rude, annoying
Mm,
no's that you just have to accept. Everybody has faced that problem. I don't think there's anyone who has not, but it's a very huge challenge. And
yes.
sometimes it makes people give up where they
Yeah.
feel like nobody really cares about this. If people are saying no to me, that means what I'm doing is not really relevant. It takes an extra level of grit. It takes an extra level of confidence, right?
Yeah.
To like boost yourself and say, okay, they said no, but it doesn't really it's not no on my purpose. It's not no on what I strongly believe in. Maybe they do not just understand, right? And
Yeah.
it's to get to a point where you're like, okay, they will eventually understand, but I keep moving.
Yep.
And I think now what we just go to is the operational part. I know that's another ball game entirely. What has been the biggest operational or production challenge that Pitra the Label has faced or probably is currently navigating?
Ordering too much. When you come from the industry and you work for big brands, sometimes you forget when you work in your own brand that you're not a big brand. And I think one of my mistakes that I can openly say, I've made a few, but one of them was over ordering a style. I was just not thinking straight. I was in my production mind for another brand, and but it all worked out well because the business model of my brand is to sell what I have. So I don't like to make
Yeah.
a new collection. It's very slow fashion that way. So I try and do small production runs and I try and make only what I can sell. But I have in the past made a mistake where I've made too much and it just took a bit longer to sell. Another mistake that I've made is trusting the wrong people in production and not listening to my gut. And what I mean by that is making sure that you really know the factory you're working with, especially if it's offshore. Most of my product is made in Melbourne. However, as the brand evolved, I now have production in different parts of the world. And one example was I used a factory that I'd never used before, which is very unlike me because I am all about relationships and I've built those factory relationships for years. And
Wow.
I just made the simple mistake of saying yes to someone I'd never worked with and unfortunately never saw my production. So paid for it and never got my production. And that's a true story that I even tell my students that, yeah, I did a production. It was a small production run. It was maybe 100 units and that person was paid and I never saw the units. So that was hard because it was actually at the time I was pregnant and I was trying to juggle everything. So I probably took it more emotional than what I would have now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But definitely, yeah, not n yeah, definitely picking the wrong person to deal with. So I really, really encourage anyone who's a fashion brand founder to make those relationships not just online, in person, and actually meet that factory and get to know them and perhaps design your collection there and then come back home just to build that relationship with them if you haven't met them before. Yeah.
Completely agree with that. And yeah, I think if I was the one who faced that problem at that point in time, it would have been so tragic for me because I will begin to question myself. I think most
Yeah.
times I take a lot of things very personally and inwardly. I'll begin to question myself. So how come I didn't know? Why wasn't I able to sense it? It can be very challenging. But I think that's how I would have taken it. And since you said what you are doing right now is a made to order system where you are
Yeah.
basically selling what is available, is what I've also been advocating for, but it's not something that is so popular. And I also don't know
No.
why. I don't know why, because it's actually a more profitable way to run a business. I find it difficult to understand why it's still something that the industry is still trying to accept or adapt. I don't know why. But how have you been able to manage cash flow, production timeline, suppliers? How have you been able to navigate those hard stuff? Those are like the make or break part of like building any brand. Right?
Yeah.
What worked,
Yeah.
what didn't work, and what did you wish someone maybe had told you earlier?
Yeah. If I had someone mentoring me, I would have wished that they told me to start leaner, to have a strategy when it comes to marketing and social media, and to be able to understand costing when it comes to wholesale. The advantage there with myself is I've always done costing because I'm from a production background. However, when you it's really funny when it's your own brand, it's like you do make those mistakes because you start to
Yeah.
second guess yourself. But when you work for someone else, it's so easy to give that advice. I don't know why, whether it's a human thing, but I would definitely start leaner and more strategic in listening to the customer. I think that's where I grew is I listened to the customer feedback. And the way I was able to do that was by having clothing in store. Everything is online, right? But it's still so valuable to be in a store, in a boutique. It still has value.
True.
And I think people have this misconception that we're in a, TikTok world and everything's online, but a lot of people still want to buy things in person and try it on, especially when you're a new brand. And I do that too myself for brands that I buy from. I will buy it and try it on first in store, know the brand fit, and then I'm happy to buy it online. Now, again, it could be a generational thing, but I think that, yeah, like I said, start leaner. What I mean by that is, really be as tight as you can on your first collection because you don't know what's going to sell. And to have those hero pieces that will make the brand look funky on a runway, but then the commercial pieces that are everyday pieces, because at the end of the day, people buy more everyday pieces than the
Yeah.
real avant-garde or real artistic pieces. And that definitely was something that I learned in the beginning, and how I managed cash flow was just making sure that my costing made up for how much my business pays for, whether that's for myself or my contractors or people that work with me. But that's what I meant by everything got very big in the end of 2023, start of 2024. I had 5 boutiques and it was very challenging to manage it on my own. So I had a choice whether I scale it and get funding to make the brand bigger and employ people, or do I scale it back enough for me to manage? And I made the choice to scale back at the time because retail, I'm not sure on your end of the world, but retail here has been very hard for brands. We have, the cost of living has gone up and people aren't shopping like they used to. So that's why I made that decision, because I looked strategically at what's happening around me and whether it was the right time in the world for me to do it. And I don't think it was, or it is still. And that saved the brand and managing that cash flow coming in.
I think the most important thing is understanding that when you are starting, there are a lot of things that are not really clear. You could have an idea of what it would be,
Yeah.
but until customers really interact with your product, you don't
Yeah.
really have the best kind of framework yet. We know that yes,
No.
brands still evolve based on consumer demand and their feedback. There's still a lot that you have to learn, especially when you are starting. But I think I
Yeah.
completely agree with what you said, starting lean, and I've even been posting about it on my LinkedIn, talking about agile production, where you are
Yeah.
like responding to consumer demand rather than
Yeah.
reacting.
Yeah.
You test, we must understand when you're starting, there's a lot of testing that comes with it. I think people always want to ignore that part and say, oh, I knew everything at once, all my forecasts were correct, and I went in, I produced. Not really, it doesn't work that way.
No. No.
So it's a process of testing, iterating, understanding, but you have to also understand there's a lot of finance that come to it. So you don't want to test with 1,000 pieces. You don't want to test with
No.
5,000 or 2,000
No.
pieces, right? You
No.
really don't want to do that.
No. And one thing I'll add in there is that I bootstrapped the whole time.
Just
So it's
imagine.
all my own money in the whole venture. And I think that
See?
makes a difference.
Yes,
Makes a
completely.
big
So
difference.
if you are tying down money in inventory, in pieces
Yeah.
that you know are not going to sell, or you are not even sure are going to sell, it's a problem. And sometimes because of the artistic stuff, creativity that comes with like launching a brand, you might want to invest more into like, what you talked about, the avant-garde kind of pieces that look so
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic. And then you forget those little things like the everyday pieces are essential items that people want
Yeah.
to always interact with. So imagine you having the wrong kind of pieces, like the way you distribute them. You see, that's already a lot. That is why I
Yeah.
am pro lean startup, pro agile production, where you are responding rather than reacting to demand. That's usually
Yeah.
the best way to start. That's the word,
Yes.
especially when you are just starting and even as you scale. How does a collection come from idea to finished product in your world? That is in Pitra the Label.
Yeah. So ideas come from all different areas, and that could be from fabric that I see, from people walking on the streets, from culture. Lately, I've been really, really invested in researching my own Balkan culture, and that comes with a lot of different countries that connect by embroidery and different prints, and really looking into the artisanal side of cultural costume. I usually start with fabric, but again, it just depends. Like some designs come purely from a fabric that I've sourced or come across, and then others will come from an inspiration that I've seen. And then, with with the current collection that I'm working on, I've started with a mood board and a color palette, sourcing fabrics around that. Again, there's no right or wrong way. I know that if you go to fashion design school, you'll be taught to, do the mood board, do the color palette. I never
Yeah,
actually designed like that. I've always draped, and I've always used fabrics to inspire me, because at the end of the day, the fabric is going to be the fit. So you can mood board all you like and do your color palettes, but once you start sourcing fabrics, that's going to be the real garment that is going to fit on the body
exactly.
and be used in production. So that's how it usually happens. And then, depending on the fabric is from, is where I will produce it. So a lot of my fabrics will come from Turkey, Japan, China, New Zealand, just depends. And so a lot of my linens and cottons that will come from New Zealand, I usually source locally and will produce locally. Whereas my fabrics that might come from Japan or Turkey or even Italy, then depending on what the style is, it will be produced offshore. So that's how it forms, from an idea, from something I've seen, from something I've felt, to then creating a silhouette that will match the fabric and that I know that will be commercially viable in production.
Yeah.
And then if I am doing more artisanal, I've just started working with a small factory in Bangladesh that support women. And so all the workers are women, and they do a lot of hand embroidery and hand weaving. And I've just started the process with them. And those types of garments take a lot longer than something in production in China. And that is where the impact is, it doesn't matter where it's being made. It's being made by the hands of women, and that is the value of my brand, and that is the impact I want to make, because I know that by them doing that, my business gives them money for their food, water, children, whatever it may be. And so I feel really good about doing that as a business.
I also think that because you
Yeah.
have a production background, it shapes how you see design. Because
Yes.
most people who go into fashion, owning a fashion brand, they are so obsessed with designs, design details,
Yes.
mood boards, color palettes.
Yes.
They're amazing. But at the end of the day, we're also talking about production viability and also
Yes.
commercial viability. So I think that's
Yeah.
where the problem is. Design teams always having problems with production teams because designers are so designers themselves, so creative, but who's going to produce it? I think it's important that it's balanced, that
Yes.
production doesn't stifle creativity, but I think it actually brings creativity to life. But we have to understand what the borders around it should be. But these are not borders that are blocking creativity, but it's just to make sure that it's possible. It's possible. This is
Yes.
how you design the drip. Is it possible to like really for this to actually come to life? Because you have that background, it really shapes how you produce. It shapes how you
Yeah.
design because you already
Yes,
know
it
that
does. It does.
viability is the most important thing. We can have amazing designs, but if it's not
Yeah.
viable, it's completely useless. And you've already
Yes.
mentioned it, and it's what I also actually wanted to ask you as the next question. What impact means in terms of your brand? Like that is beyond revenue, because most people these days are just about money. I just want to make the money. I want to brag about the fact I have a 6 to 7 figure dollar business. But beyond that, you're able to make it clear that it is empowering women too, helping them
Yeah.
to understand and also making them to connect with culture. When you know that I've been able to do this, you feel so fulfilled. It's way
Yes.
beyond money. And I think it's something that money cannot buy. I am so serious.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
feeling that I don't know how to explain it. I think when you are just starting a brand, and it's like when you are able to see product market fit, that okay, a customer actually wants this product. There's a kind of feeling that comes. It's
Yes.
beyond the money. It's I don't know
Yes.
how to explain it, because it's something that you feel, and if you've not felt it,
Yeah.
words can't really explain it, because it's
No.
so impactful. It's so impactful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where is your brand going in the next 2 to 3 years? What's the vision? What do you really see? The real ambition behind your brand, and where you see the future?
Yeah. Like I said, it's becoming a more impactful brand and more artisanal and key pieces that you can pass down to generations. I think that's where the brand is going. And that's where I guess the commercial side of it isn't so commercial anymore. And I think that's where the brand is evolving at the moment is what I'm working on currently are a mixture of pieces that are artisanal but also commercial, but also tell a story, and that story can be passed on to the next generation.
I love it. And I think you are pro impact.
Oh, thank you.
And it's just everything. I think focusing
I know.
on that aspect also drives revenue, because all of these things are set within what you know your audience wants. It's like
Yeah.
you are responding to how they feel and
Yeah.
want and what they want. So I
Yeah.
really love
Yeah.
that about what you're building, and it's a very bright future, because what we look at the future of brand these days is fast, speed. I am pro fast or speed. I don't want you to be slow and to the point where you're unable to meet up with demand. But the way we talk about fast these days is so off. Nobody
Yeah.
wants you to be slow, so slow. No, neither do you want you to be
Yeah.
wasteful and be so fast. So I want us to also dabble a bit into the technology part of what you're running and your business. What tools and technology are currently part of how you run your brand? Probably like your day-to-day business. What tools do you use most times?
I use a mixture of things. Obviously, my brand is on Shopify, so online. So I have a lot of integrations and systems based within Shopify. Some being AI. I've integrated AI recently in the brand, and that is purely for, I guess, because it's a small brand, and there's not a team of 20 here. I've used it in ways where, for instance, through Shopify, I have like a customer service app. However, it comes straight to my messages. So I have an option as the founder to reply to you straight away. Or if I'm not looking at the messages, the AI assistant will reply for me. It's more of like an AI agent within the website, but within my actual design and production side, I still do things very old school. I'm still using like Adobe Suite and Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that. But the difference is depending on what has to be done. I do sometimes use AI to assist in the fiddly tasks to make it quicker for me because the brand has key people that work for it, but they don't work for me every day. So it's managed a lot by me. And then, so those little admin tasks that can, really take a lot out of your day when you're an entrepreneur, I can use AI tools there. But when it comes to production, I have my own system set in place, which I've created myself. And that helps me able to track, monitor, and communicate with the factories. Also, because I do it locally
Okay.
as well, some of it is physical too. So I have my own buttons or zips, or I create my own tech packs at home, in my studio, or in my office. So I have 3 different places that I work, and it all just depends on what it is.
What do you think about AI in creativity? Because people have gotten to the point where they believe that They can prompt almost anything and they term it a creation. They term it a
Yeah.
design. And
Yeah.
I am pro AI, I am pro tech, I love technology, but
Yeah.
I think brands are really yet to understand its proper place. Technology adoption is
Yeah.
a strategy on its own. It's not just something you go in just at once because depending on your brand, depending on your customers, that's your target market, depending on your budget, technology adoption
Yeah.
is going to be totally different. I think people just use AI these days for their designs and say, oh, I do not need a designer anymore. I can use AI for this. Or I do not need a tech pack designer anymore. I can create my tech packs with AI. Or I can draft my patterns with AI because cloud is doing a lot of amazing things these days, right? And
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
leaving a lot of things to cloud and AI or ChatGPT or Gemini. So what do you think should be the proper place of AI in creativity? And let's also say probably in production or the technical aspect of design.
Yeah, yeah. I think AI should be used, a lot of people on the internet talk about it as a tool. I think it's more of a system and having it a part of your system, systems thinking. I think that a lot of people are scared that AI will replace creativity. I don't think so. The reason I say that is because I have seen my own students prompt it with their knowledge, and then I prompt it with my knowledge. And what it will come out with, like for instance, Claude, will be totally different because
Exactly.
of my experience. And I actually have used Claude to produce images for production purposes. And the what I found, the reason why I did it is because when you are designing or creating a tech pack, sometimes when you're trying to do your sketches and you're trying to explain something to the factory, especially if they don't speak English, sometimes it can be hard to write. So you try and sketch it out. But sometimes, depending on the trim or the pattern or the design, it can be difficult to find an image because, back in the day before I would always use a reference image of something similar so the factory could source. I think where AI is really good is that now I can prompt it to generate an image of a specific trim that I'm trying to find. And I think that's where it's really helpful in production with image generation. It's not you designing, it's you using it to source. However, unfortunately, there are people out there that will go into ChatGPT or Claude, generate an image and say, I'm a designer. But the one place I think they will get stuck, and I've seen it happen, is fit. You can generate all you
Very
want,
true.
but if you don't know fit, and if you don't know drape, and if you don't know fabric, good luck to that garment because it's not going to fit the way you think it should unless you have that experience. So that's why I urge anyone in fashion that if they do use AI, it's not a bad thing, but it will make you come undone at some point of the process if you don't know garment construction and the actual process of designing a garment. I've had designers I've worked with in the past that were very good at design, like you said before, but the minute it came to creating a pattern and then creating it for production, it didn't work and we had to redesign it. So I think
Yeah.
that's the same thing with AI. I don't think people should be scared of it. I think if you have the knowledge and the creativity, you are the human inputting that in there and then producing the garment. I think that there are parts of it that the people that think they can get away with that will find that they will come undone. And it's about fit. Sorry.
Of the fact that you have a production lens. It is so important in anything. I think founders should have at least a basic understanding of how production works so that design
Yeah.
comes more. I don't think I have the right word to explain it, but designs come to life and it's not like you are
Yeah.
stifled at any point and then begin to blame production people. They do not understand what I want to do or they do not want to work with me to achieve my vision, but you've been able to like make it completely clear and you have a proper idea of garment construction and how it's meant to work, and then your designs come to life
Yeah.
properly or the way you
Yeah.
want it to.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a current need that you have in your business that technology can't solve, but you wish it existed or like it worked differently. What's your biggest unmet need that when it comes to technology currently at your stage, you wish it exists or maybe something that works that you feel should work differently?
To explore, which I haven't yet, but I've seen a lot of AI integrated solutions when it comes to customers knowing their size. I don't know if you've seen that. There's these apps where it can scan your body and then know what size you will be for that brand. I think in
Yes.
future I would love to explore that for international customers, as I do sell to the UK and the US, but they're very different customers. And I think that would be helpful, not just for my brand, for any brand,
Mm-hmm.
for international customers to know your sizing, because unfortunately sizing, as much as we want it to be universal, it's not, and we all pattern make slightly different and our sizing varies. Like the UK, Australia have similar sizing, whereas the US is different. So I
Yeah.
think that technology would be cool to incorporate in the future for my more commercial pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really good. What does sustainability mean to your brand? Does it play a huge role in how you build, and what does it look like in practice?
For me, sustainability is not just about the materials, it's about the people and about the end of life where the garment goes. And I think that I focus on that with who I work with, being inclusive, also with creating garments that are made to last and to be passed on. And that's where I see sustainability, because if I go down, if we talk about fabrics and we go down that path, there's just so much to it that we could make a whole different session on it. So I
Yeah,
just try my
true.
best to stick to the pillar of people and treating people kindly and fairly and working with the right people and paying them is what I stick to as a brand, and then obviously end of life. Yeah.
True. Yes. In wrapping up, what would you want
Yeah, cool.
other fashion brand founders, especially those who are just starting out, to know? What do you want? What's like your message right now to fashion brand founders?
Learn production. That too. To fashion founders, fashion is a very tough industry, and just because you get a million no's doesn't mean you won't get one amazing yes. So keep
Yeah.
going and never give up.
True,
Yeah.
true, 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 true. I think that part is so important because it can be so
Yeah.
discouraging when you're just starting out. It's as if nobody believes in you, and truly, it can be very emotional. It can be so emotional.
Yes.
So it's just good to say, no
Yes.
matter what's happening, I'm going.
Yeah.
Just the last question: is there anything that probably we're able to cover that want fashion forward audience to know about you or your brand? Anything you want to say?
Just check out the brand on Instagram, Pitra the Label, and follow us, because I know that even if there isn't a garment that you like, I'm sure that you can join the community of fellow female founders and entrepreneurs, because that's another value of the brand is, we want to be a part of the story for every woman, and especially, to those women that are founders and entrepreneurs, because I think that that is a big value, and it's pretty much our community that I've managed to build around the brand. And I have a lot of different entrepreneurs from different industries that love the brand, not just for the clothing, but for what we value, and that is the people.
I love your message. And like I said, two things that really stood out for me in this conversation is production. I love the fact that
Yeah.
you are so production aware and production conscious.
Yeah.
And then impact, because that's everything
Yeah.
from the beginning of our
Yeah.
conversation, even down to the end. It's impact to your community, women, culture, entrepreneurship, standing and being resilient, even in the face of no's, like capital N-O's, the compassionate
Yeah.
no's, the rude no's, some people might not actually tell you no, but they will try to like package it in some level of maybe mild conversations, but you can already sense that this person is telling me no, I really doesn't care. You are just like hitting
Yeah.
hard and going on no matter what. And it's really also the heart of Founders Corner, because I've just seen amazing brands, amazing brand owners who are doing a lot of work. But one way or the other, people don't really get to see that part of being an entrepreneur as a fashion founder. Everybody's just concerned about the product, the product, the product, but there's a lot more. And that is
Yes.
why I decided to
Yeah.
like also bring you on board for you to also share that story and
Thank
also
you.
talk to other fashion brand owners so that they understand that impact and learn production, please. Learn production is
Yes.
so important to anything that you're
Yes.
building as a fashion brand owner. So
Yes.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I
No, thank
appreciate your
you.
time. I appreciate your
Thank you.
message and everything you are building with Pitra the Label. And every link to what you're building, the website, everything will be made available so that everybody can connect with you and also join your amazing community of entrepreneurs and founders.
Thank you so much.